As I needed to do more research into where I was actually from and why we were so far apart from that culture. And I was searching for who I was and what my identity was for so many years. And even in times where I wasn't, I didn't think I was, I still was, and I actually still am. I've met a lot of Indians that have no clue that Indians were in India. Most of the time I tell them, they're like, wow, I had no idea that they were there or they got moved there. But just like they speak broken English out there, I would say they speak broken Hindi. We like to call the Indian music out there that's kind of morphed into the Caribbean feel chutney music.
Hi everyone, welcome to my last episode of Fearless Chapter 1. In this episode, I interview a close friend, Alicia, and together we are trying to bring awareness of Guyanese culture amongst the Indian community. You will hear stories of how Alicia had not been included in the Indian community here in the Bay Area, California, because she was not considered quote-unquote Indian because she's Indian from South America. There are Indians who have migrated to different parts of the world for many, many, many reasons. So let's go ahead and educate ourselves before we make a negative impact on the lives of so many American immigrants. I really do hope you enjoyed this conversation today. Hi everybody, welcome to Fearless Chapter 1. Today I have my dear friend Alicia, and me and Alicia have known each other for 7 years now, and we hang out a lot, but during COVID-19 we haven't hung out that much. But I'm so excited to have Alicia here today, so let me welcome Alicia and have Alicia tell you all a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Kay. Thanks for having me on this interview. It's pretty awesome. A little bit about myself. My name is Alicia, and I was born in Guyana, South America, and I live here in California, the Bay Area. Pretty much grew up here most of my life, and pretty much lived in Hayward, I would say majority of the time. San Leandro, Hayward, high school here, and college.
Yeah, Alicia and I met when I lived with my parents in Hayward, California as well, and we used to hang out so much during that time. She lived down the street from me. So tell us a little bit about your Indo-Guyanese background, and when did your parents immigrate to the United States?
I came here with my family when I was 2 years old. That was in 1990. Came here actually with my mom first, her sister, my cousin, my 3 aunts, my uncle, and my grandparents. So we got here. We lived in San Mateo. We actually, we started just humble beginnings. We all lived together in a small 2-bedroom duplex, and just started from scratch. My dad later came when I was 7. He was able to get out here with my uncle, and once he got here, then, my mom and I and my dad, we moved out and lived in an apartment in San Mateo and went to elementary school there.
How was your elementary school experience? Do you remember anything from Guyana? First of all, you were 2 years old. I know you probably don't remember much, but or does anything stick out to you as a 2-year-old in Guyana and elementary school out here? What was your experience like?
I did go back when I was 5 to see my dad. So I do remember some things from that time. Elementary school, I knew, even though I was young, that I was in a different place, that my family was in a different place, that, we were all struggling, and, there's a lot of great times, but there's also a lot of not so good times. So I knew my dad was far away, so it was hard for me just at a young age not to have my dad. During elementary school, I didn't do too well because I knew that he wasn't around. But it was difficult that time until my dad got here.
Okay, so would you say like the assimilation piece was pretty difficult because your dad wasn't here, or because of everything else that was happening in your life?
I think at that time, I was a little too young to know the difference or assimilating with anything. I mean, I knew I was with my family. We were all living together, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncle, my cousin. So that support system really helped at home. With regards to my differences with other kids at that age, it was a little. I do have a story to tell, but I'm going to get into that at a later question that I know that you have. But for the most part, I was a shy girl. I would cry really easily in school. I did not want my mom leaving me. I remember when she dropped me off at kindergarten and she was ready to leave. I burst into tears. I didn't want to be there. I actually wouldn't even eat lunch until she would come back during lunch to eat with me. So I had a lot of things going on during that time. It was a confusing time at that age for me with the change, and my mom was working all the time, and so was my aunts and my uncle, just struggling, trying to figure out a way to make it work here.
So, what I'm curious about is that Guyanese and then the Indian background, right? So, do you consider yourself Indian?
So I saw that question. It took a while to make a decision on that. I'm going to start off by saying no. And the reason I say no is because when I was young, because I physically looked like a person that would fit in that group, I would identify myself as Indian. And I want to speak for myself, not on behalf of anyone else that's Guyanese out there, because they might have a different experience. But geographically, growing up here during that time in California, there is not at all very many Guyanese people here at all. I've probably met one or two the whole time that I've been here. Um, but I'm going to say no, and the reason being is because predominantly Indians here in California are from India. And when I would say, hey, I'm Indian, that would actually set the expectation to that other person that traditionally I grew up with the same culture and tradition as Indians from India. And then that would be just a huge misconception because I actually didn't. And so gradually what I started doing was just saying, I'm from, when someone would ask, I would say, I'm from South America, because most of the time people wouldn't even know where Guyana is. So I would say, I'm from South America, or I'd say, I'm from the Caribbean. And that would put me in a better place, at least, to start off the conversation from there. So no, I would say no. You'll find me saying I'm from the Caribbean, South America. And if anyone wants to ask me any more details about it, and they're like, oh, well, you look Indian, then I'll go into talking about that. Um, the ancestry, obviously, my ancestors are from India, Calcutta, India, from what I've studied and what my grandparents have mentioned. Um, but that goes back about 6 or 7 generations ago.
Okay, so that means, so in Guyana, when you go back to visit, are all of your family and your neighbors Indian, or what's the mix like in Guyana? And also, I want to ask you a question about being included in Indian communities. Do you even want to be included out here? That's my question. So I have two questions really. So the first question is, how is that dynamic between Indian people and Guyanese people, or is there a divide in Guyana?
Definitely. I mean, there is. I mean, from speaking to my parents, I mean, my parents obviously they grew up there, so I get more information from them. But there is a lot of segregation out there. I mean, a long time ago, between the population out there is majority African and Indian, and there was a lot of segregation between the two out there a long time ago. I don't know about now, but Guyana is a very diverse country. I mean, there's not just African and Indians. There's Chinese, there's European, there's Portuguese, um, and that's why I think I would say I can't completely identify with Indians, because we have morphed into the Caribbean culture. Like even the food we make, it's not just Indian. It's like Chinese. It's stuff from originally from Guyana or meshed in with like Jamaican food and things like that. Um, it's diverse out there. With regards to your question on the culture, the Indian culture, and if I feel like I'm in a space of fitting in the Indian culture, I would say, when I was young, it was difficult for me to the story I was going to share is when I was young, I remembered going to school and I saw a small group of Indian kids they looked like they were from India or somewhere from there. But to me, I was young. I was like, oh, I look like these people. And when you're young, you want to fit in a group. You want to feel wanted or belonged in a group. And so they walked up to me and we started talking and they were like, oh, are you Indian? And I was like, well, no, my family and I are from Guyana, but we make curry. So I was young, that's what I said, right? We make curry, and like I had noticed, one of the kids they had curry too. My mom packed curry for me, which was kind of embarrassing because the other kids had like the Lunchables and stuff like that, and I was eating curry. But you know, so I was like, yeah, we make curry like you guys, and she's like, well, do you guys, and she's kind of like the leader of the pack, like the other kids are behind her and they're listening. And she's like, well, well, you're not from there, but do you speak Hindi? And I said, no, no, I don't speak Hindi. And she's like, well, are you Hindu? And I'm like, no. And so like there's more questions, like she's just going in, and I'm like, no, no, no. And finally they're just looking at me, they're like, well, yeah, I don't think you fit in with us. Like it was like I was just outcasted out of the group, and that was a really early, that was a moment of impact in my life at such a young age of like confusion. Um just I didn't understand why I looked like these people, but I didn't fit in with these people.
How old were you again?
I was probably, maybe 7, but at a young age I realized that I wasn't the same. And that was hard. And I went back and I asked my parents about it, and even my parents didn't know. They were actually just as much shocked as I was coming here. This is the first time they had exposure with Indians from India, and realizing that we actually weren't the same. Um, but at a young age, I knew, and I was very interested in wanting to know more about the Indian culture because I knew that my parents told me, well, some of our ancestors are from there. And so just having this earnest need to want to be a part of something, I fell in love with the culture. I watched, my dad had to keep going and buying me Indian movies because I was obsessed with watching Indian movies. I loved the clothes. I loved everything about the culture, and I wanted so badly to be a part of it. And ironically enough, I ended up being the president of the Indian club in high school. But it wasn't necessarily because I was so much like them. It was because I was different, and I ended up learning that even within India, there's different groups or different castes of like Indians, and because I was different, I was able to get along with everyone in that group in high school. Um, so in some ways, yes, I, I do, but long story short, I mean, having so many friends from India and going to the functions and seeing the functions and things like that, it was not how I was raised. Like we don't do those big celebrations and receptions. Like in the Indian clothing, we don't wear that. At least speaking for me, like my family, I wasn't. Although I wish I did at one point, it wasn't the same. It's not the same.
So I want to touch on two things, right? So it sounds like you were denied an opportunity to fit in the cliques or the Indian people or in the Indian culture at a very young age. So that can be super traumatic, for somebody because your opinion changes based on that experience, right? So so if that never happened to you at a young age, would you consider yourself Indo-Guyanese?
That's a good question. That was the beginning for me. I mean, it wasn't just that time that I ran into that. It was going on as I got older, and that's when I realized I needed to do more research into where I was actually from and why this was, why we were so far apart from that culture. And I was searching for who I was and what my identity was for so many years. And even in times where I wasn't, I didn't think I was, I still was, and I actually still am. I had many occurrences where I was working as a cashier, and I've had Indians come up to me and start speaking in Hindi, and I had a guy get really offended because I didn't know what he was saying. And I said, I apologized. I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And then he was like, well, where are you from? Aren't you from India? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm actually from South America, Guyana. And he was like, well, you lost your culture and this and that. So I had a lot of occurrences where people were actually offended because I didn't live up to that. And I knew it was, I mean, a day like today, I know that that's not my fault or his fault. We're only speaking from what we each know as an individual, but I've met a lot of Indians that have no clue that Indians were in India. Most of the time I tell them, they're like, wow, I had no idea that they were there or they got moved there. So, um, that is why I realized that I need to just tell people exactly where I'm from. Like, I'm from Guyana. So that way there's not that expectation of, well, you should be speaking this language. Well, you should be carrying yourself a certain way or live to this standard. And it's like, no, it's not the same, so.
Also, there should never be an expectation for somebody to speak a certain language based on someone's judgment, right, of them. So it sounds like people were judging based on, what you look like. They were judging you for being Indian, and when they realized you were from Guyana, some even didn't include you in their little cliques or in the community, right? And I think that is just not right. And we should be including everybody into everything, because we live in California, especially in the Bay Area, where we are progressives, and we should be including everybody, and I even think that non-progressives should be including everybody, but that's just my opinion, and that is why I have this show, right? So I'm so sorry that happened to you as a 7-year-old child. So going back to Guyana, and you visiting in Guyana, I did a little research on Guyana, and I found out that Guyana is like 60 to 70% Indian, right? So it sounds like, the whole Indian culture got morphed into the Caribbean culture. And it also sounds like there's like the Indian heritage got lost in Guyana. So there's no like celebrations of like Diwali or Ganesh or any of those like the traditional Indian holidays and celebrations.
There is actually, okay. I would say that there are some Guyanese that are Hindu. They speak broken Hindi. So in Guyana was colonized by the British in the 1830s, and predominantly the language there is English. The other ethnicities that we have out there, races, they may still speak the language, but just like they speak broken English out there, I would say they speak broken Hindi. So I've had some of the music we like to call the Indian music out there that's kind of morphed into the Caribbean feel, chutney music. And I've had some of my friends that were Indian or Fijian listen to it, and they were like, I don't understand what they're saying. But they are speaking Hindi, but it's broken Hindi. And they do, the ones that are still following the traditions and the religions are still celebrating those cultures for sure, the Indian culture. But for my family particularly, my grandma actually, my grandparents on my dad's side were Hindu, but my grandma was baptized Christian, and then on my mom's side, her parents were Muslim. So there's a lot of different different things going on there for me, but that is why I didn't grow up with that culture for sure. There's a lot of, there's Christians out there, there's Muslims out there, um, there's Guyanese Indians that are Hindu, but it's not. I would say it's still not completely the same. In fact, some of the things that I know that they still carry on and do, like they may not even know the root of where it's coming from, like from India, but it's definitely still there for sure.
It sounds a lot like different parts of India too. So I'm from Goa, right? And in Goa we were colonized by the Portuguese, and of course all of India was colonized by the British. And then in Goa specifically, there's 90% of people who live in Goa in India are Catholic, right? In Goa, so and there's also so many and such different cultures within Goa itself. It sounds just like what you just described. So we do also have multiple religions, multiple cultures, and I too, when I moved to the States, people didn't even know, like Indians didn't even know where Goa was, and that was just like wild to me because I'm like, I'm from the same country as you. I am Indian,
Yeah.
and and you're
Yeah.
still not including me in this
Yeah.
Indian community. So that's just ignorance to me, but that's just
Yeah.
my experience.
Yeah, I think that was mind blowing for me because I would expect that from someone that was not from India to not know. But when I was meeting Indians and they didn't know that Indians were in other places of the world other than India, I was blown away by that because I at least expected them to know. But I mean, there's you'd be surprised a lot of people actually don't know, and I know it's not just with Indians, it's with Africans and Chinese, and I mean we've all throughout history ended up in different places of the world for different reasons, and there's just a lot of history back there that that people don't know.
I encourage people to look up Guyana and look up the Indian communities in Guyana right now. And actually, there's so many Indian communities all around the world, like you just said. And so I would just Google that, right? Like Indian communities around the world. And that's something that we just need to educate people more, right? So that being said, what does identity mean to you? I know identity is such a huge thing in general within our bodies, right? So it makes us feel more grounded, it makes us more rooted. So, what does identity mean to you?
I'm a unique case. I mean, in a lot of ways, I was able to, because I didn't fit in with anyone, I learned to just see people for who they were. That gave me the ability to get along with all different kinds of people, and it's great. And the idea of being Indian and Guyanese and, whatever I want that I decide that I could default myself into being, it's all a part of who I am, right? It's a part of who I am, and it took me a while to understand that because for a while I tried to fit myself in a group because we have this way of just wanting to slot ourselves into a specific group and say this is where we fit in. But I learned that I don't fit in a group. All of these things are a part of who I am, but not one defines me. So I am, I would say, with regards to where I'm from, yes, I'm from Guyana. With regards to, oh, are you Indian? I would say, yes, that's in my ancestry, that's there. I grew up here in California, so that's a whole different thing. All of these things make me who I am and the person I am today, but not one truly defines who I
So,
am.
what advice would you give your older self when you first moved here and I mean, sure, you were young, but when and that 7-year-old girl who was answering all of those multiple questions the other 7-year-old girl was asking, what advice would you give that 7-year-old girl today?
I wish I could tell myself when I was young that you weren't created to fit in with anybody. You were created to be different for a reason. And I know that there's a lot of other people that's going through that, finding their self and their identity, especially when they come from such a diverse background. Especially here in America, we're a melting pot. But I would have just told myself, you were meant to be different for a reason, and you'll find the answers later. But don't worry about it, and don't. I was definitely at a young age really sad and upset about it, and struggling with that. But at least I would have told myself that, like, to give myself that reassurance.
That's great. Would you give that same advice to another 7-year-old girl who's struggling right now?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I wish I could. Throughout elementary school, middle school, high school. I mean, really, this is a precious time for anybody growing up that really molds you into the person you are. And those experiences can be very traumatic. Um, and it was really hard for me. My parents moved a couple times during that age, and I had to keep losing my friends over and over again. Um, so yeah, I would put that out there and give that encouragement to anybody else that is feeling that way, and just trust the process.
Listen, everybody, trust the process. That's important. And I love how you said you were meant to be different. We are not meant to fit in. And this is true. We are all just creatures and creations of the universe, and we're meant to be different from one another so that we can learn and grow from one another. And I really do appreciate that, what you just said. And that's not just advice for your old self, just advice for your current self and for all of the people out there. So going back to Guyana, I read in a New York Times article that the caste system does not exist within Indian communities in Guyana. Would you say that is true in your experience?
Actually, I had no idea about the caste system until I was in high school, and I was part of the Indian Student Union Club, and I started making a lot of friends from India, not just India, the Middle East, Fiji, and it was through them that I learned about this caste system thing, and I was like, whoa, like this is crazy. Like, well, if there's a caste system there, then where do I fit in? Because I'm probably at the bottom of the totem pole. But yeah, it was bizarre. Like I never heard about that in my family. I think it makes a lot of sense too, because I remember when I would meet Indians as well, they would one of the first things they asked me what was my last name, and I think they were connecting that to where I would fit in where I was from, what caste I was, and all this stuff, like all of this information that I had no idea about. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'd like to even ask you, I mean, that what's your opinion about the caste system?
That's a great question because one of my first experiences when I was like 7 or 8 was that I couldn't spend the night with one of my really, really best friends in Goa. And I didn't understand, to be honest, I remember I would have so many friends, and I still do till today, but I used to spend the night at different friends' homes. And this particular girl, we spent an entire day together and we were having so much fun. And then she was like, can you ask your dad, like, if you could spend the night? And my dad was waiting outside to pick me up. And this would happen a lot, right? Like, because at the time my dad worked in different places in Goa. And so I couldn't get a hold of him. So when he would come to pick me up, I would just run outside and be like, I'm staying. Can I stay? And it would be okay, right? My dad would be like, okay, fine. And then he would leave. But this particular time, I ran outside super excited. And my friend, even right before I ran outside, she was like, I think he's going to say no. Like, she already knew, like, within her that, my dad. I was like, why would you say that? No, he's going to say yeah. He always says yeah. And then I ran outside and my dad's like, get your stuff. After I said, Dad, can I stay? Or Papa, I used to call him Papa, can I stay? And he said, get your stuff. And he was like really stern. And I never experienced that with my dad before, And I was confused. I was like, what? Why? Why can't? And I was trying to get him to say something, but he didn't. And I ran back in and she's like, my friend's like, he said no, huh? And I said, mm-hmm. I was like, I'm so confused. I don't know why. I was so confused. And then she's like, I told you, and then I was like, I'm so sorry. And then I grabbed my stuff and then it was on my dad's motorbike. And so I was right behind him. And the whole time I'm in my head, like, why did he say no? Blah, 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 blah. And so when we finally get home, I asked him again, and he's like, no, he didn't want to answer me, I didn't even know what the caste system was until then. But Alicia, the weird thing is that I've always, in my core, been the same person, even when I was a child. And I remember thinking, like, we're these supposedly these Catholics that go to church every Sunday, and in church they say don't judge people, don't like discriminate against people. And in my heart at that moment, I was like, in my head, I was like, y'all are hypocrites. Like, how can you sit there, go to church every Sunday and not let me, this young child, spend the night with another girl? We were having so much fun. And it wasn't even like, why can't you see beyond that? Like, why can't you see beyond the caste system? And my parents, like, at that point, before that, I super trusted them. They were super, liberal and, just progressive human beings in general. And in that moment, it was like, I don't trust y'all no more. Like, I just felt this like divide between them, and that's when I started writing poetry for the first time in my life, like, just to get all of my thoughts and feelings and sadness really out on paper. Of course I've grown since then, and of course, like, they're my parents regardless, and I know that they want the best for me. But this caste system thing is not just my parents, right? It's so like ingrained in our culture, in our beings, that it's like we need to get it out of us. We need to get that. It's not even. I honestly don't know what it is. It's this caste system is dividing our own people, our own communities.
I think it's natural for, human beings, like I said, to find ways to segregate ourselves, or putting ourselves in different groups. And I think that's been around since the beginning of time, and it's kind of hard to get rid of something like that. And I think, it's great. I think it's great that you're having this show right now to, like, let's normalize the idea of people not necessarily having to fit in one group. I mean, we're all our own person and our own being, made from our own experiences in life. And, we don't have to fit in one place. So,
yeah. We don't have to fit in, and we also need to educate people about our own experiences, right? Okay, so what do you want Indian Americans, Indians, and Americans to know about Indo-Guyanese communities or Guyanese communities?
Like I said, people usually don't know where Guyana is, or if they do, they associate it with the whole Jim Jones assassination that happened a long time ago. But I would say there's much more to learn about Guyana. There's a lot of history there. There's diversity there, just like there is here in America, and it's a very unique small country, just full of a lot of information and great food. It's not very well known, but there are a lot of other countries out there I know that I don't know about, but it's so full of information and culture. Um and yeah, I encourage people to learn about it if they're interested in knowing more about Guyana. Also, I mean, I know throughout this interview I've been speaking on behalf of myself, just being, living here in Cali. But, if Guyana is too far for anybody that feels that they want to visit out there's a huge community of Guyanese people in New York, Queens. There's a little Guyana out there. There's a large community of Guyanese in Florida as well. If you just want to have a little taste of Guyana, go ahead. I encourage you to go to New York, Queens, and just take a stroll. It's literally like you're walking in Guyana, and you don't have to actually be there. So check it out.
Are there any Guyanese restaurants in the Bay Area in California?
There actually is not. There isn't. There's some Jamaican Caribbean restaurants, but there is not like a Guyanese restaurant. I think it's because there's not a very large community of Guyanese out here. But who knows? Maybe one of these days. I know that there's a little bit more Guyanese people here now than there was before. So we'll see. Maybe later on in the
Okay,
future.
this next section of my show is all about getting to know our guest speakers on a whole nother level, and I like to call it fearless funning. One of the questions I have for you is, do you have any mentors or motivational speakers who've made a huge impact on your life and the way you live it now?
I'm not gonna go and name out like famous guest speakers or anything like that. But I would say for sure, number one, my parents, um, to start off with. And I think that our greatest mentors can be the people right around us, growing up, and dealing with the identity, having problems identifying myself and all these things. Apart from that, it steered me to being the person I am now. And I looked upon not just my parents, but seeing people for who they are. I saw things that I admired about them and I liked about them, and I spent more time with those people. And those people ranged from being, just a few of my close friends to teachers to managers, like a few therapists that I've met. They all gave me information and taught me things that I learned through them that really helped me get through life and steer me in the right direction. And whenever you see something you admire about someone and like about them, I would encourage you to spend a lot of time with them and get to know
It's
them.
so true. I mean, our mentors can just be, you know, our neighbors and somebody who's taught us something and someone who's helped us get to some place that we wanted to get to, you know. And I really, really love that. So, can you give me one or two tips or ideas for listeners on how to be fearless just like you? Because, I know that there's so much I learned from you as a friend. And I just want you to share those tips with our listeners because, like you just said, you want to encourage people to get to know somebody, right? And even if it's somebody that they just met at a grocery store. So share with us one or two tips on how you've been so fearless.
One thing that I've learned is that whenever there's something that gives you a little bit of anxiety or just a little bit of fear, and it could be doing the smallest thing as to having a conversation with somebody or just public speaking or going to an interview or something like that. If there is the slightest bit of fear in you, I would encourage you to run after it and just do it. Just do it, because when you do it, then you'll realize it wasn't as scary as you thought it was. And um, it will help you grow so much faster. It would catapult you further into what you're destined to do. And you'll learn and gain so much from it. So, any fear, run after it and just do it.
Just like Nike said, just do it. So, Alicia, what are you going to do this week that's going to be fearless?
Kay, to be honest with you, doing this interview was, I think this would count as number one. I almost chickened out. I was going to tell you, I don't think I could do this anymore, Kay, because, these questions actually really, really hit home for me. This was one of the biggest challenges for me growing up and getting to know myself and figuring out who I was and how I identified with myself and other people, and just really where I fit in. And it was something I struggled with for a while. And it's, and I'm in my 30s now, and I'm only now really realizing all these things that I'm giving you, all these answers I'm giving you today. Like I said, had I had spoken to you maybe a few years ago, I may have had different answers for these questions. But there's been a lot of growth, and there's been a lot of, you know, through those hurts and, disappointments or feelings of not fitting in actually led me to understanding more about who I am. And that's the beauty of life.
That I love that. The beauty of life is also to include people and getting to know people, right? And I'm really sorry that communities have hurt you, people have hurt you, just because of not making you feel fit in, or making you feel included. And that's not how we want to raise our future leaders of America and the world, our children. We want to teach them on how to appreciate differences and learn from them and grow from them. And I am so happy and that you made it here to this interview. And I'm glad that you did, because people are going to learn so much from this and so much from your experience. And I'm happy that you made it, and I'm happy that you didn't chicken out. But thank you so much, Alicia, for being here. I really appreciate it. And any last words before we end this interview?
Nope, I think that's it. I think I said everything that I really wanted to share. And thank you, Kay, for giving me this opportunity to do this. I really appreciate it. You did a great job. Um, you made me feel a lot more comfortable than I thought I was gonna feel. But yeah, I really hope that this makes an impact to many people out there, and I think it's great that you're doing all this. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to me and Alicia chat today. Okay, so what did we learn today? Gosh, so much. Let's just start by Googling Guyana, their culture, traditions, where they are on the map, and most importantly, their food. Of course, we can't forget the food. Here are just a few takeaways from today's conversation with Alicia. 1. When we meet people from different backgrounds, we have to welcome them with open arms, embrace and learn from their differences. 2, let's teach our children and youth, who are our future generation of leaders, to do the same. Let's be inclusive, kind, respectful, and speak up for each other when people do the opposite. We are meant to be different so that we can learn from each other. We are not meant to fit into one group or one category or one anything for that matter. Like I said earlier, we are meant to be different. So let's just be ourselves. And lastly, embrace our own differences so that we can inspire others to do the same. Thank you so much for listening to Chapter 1 of Fearless, and I will come back strong with Chapter 2 very, very soon, so I hope you stay tuned and share this with your family and your friends so that they can all catch up with Chapter 1. Thanks so much for listening. Until Chapter 2, stay fearless. Thank you all so much for listening to Chapter 1 of Fearless. It's been so much fun to record these episodes of 4 amazing women, and it's been an honor to share them with you. In Chapter 2 of Fearless, you will get a deeper look into who I am and what has made me, me. I want to bring you more on healing and how people can do so, not just through art, but also through science. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to know when Chapter 2 will drop. I appreciate you all so very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of 2020.